You were never meant to hear this. What I'm about to reveal has been buried beneath layers of doctrine, sealed by the silence of the powerful, and hidden from history by men who feared the consequences of the truth. But tonight, you will hear it. Imagine a stone chamber deep beneath a crumbling convent where the faint scent of old blood mingles with incense. Picture a single candle flickering, illuminating writings scratched into the walls by hands that would never touch freedom again. The church would have you believe St. Mary's Convent was a beacon of charity, but what if I told you it was a trap? A cage for innocence, where obedience was twisted into submission and faith was weaponized against the faithful. In the forgotten shadows of Wisconsin, 23 nuns vanished. Their names erased, their souls bartered in a game of power, and their stories sealed behind limestone walls. The church claims administrative errors, lost paperwork, harmless transfers. But hidden in a locked vault beneath the diocesan archive is a ledger that tells a darker tale of young women promised to God, delivered instead to something far more sinister. And now, for the first time in over a century and a half, that ledger's secrets are about to surface. What you're about to hear is dangerous knowledge. Once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. This is no ghost story, no tale told to frighten children. This is the truth that men in robes and crowns would burn to keep silent. Before we descend into the depths of this forbidden history, ask yourself, are you ready to see behind the veil? Ready to walk where few have dared? Because what waits beyond this point may change you forever. The first of the missing was Sister Agnes O'Connor, 23, with hair the color of ripened wheat and eyes like an autumn sky. On an April morning in 1855, her cot lay empty. The official word? A transfer to Minnesota. But no train tickets were purchased. No coach left the convent gates. And in her cell, beneath the loose floorboard, was found a scrap of paper. 5 words. A desperate plea. He waits in the dark. Who was he? And why did no one search? The descent begins now. Let us enter St. Mary's, together. The fog that clings to Lake Michigan's shores in spring is no ordinary mist. It is a shroud, the same shroud that hid the silent departure of Sister Agnes. But the fog did not erase the deep tracks left by something heavy dragged across the convent's frost-hardened grounds that night. Tracks that led not toward the road or the rail, but to the edge of the old well behind the east wing. A well long, sealed with iron bars. Those bars were found twisted as if by some monstrous strength, and the ground about them churned with signs of a violent struggle. The church's men would later claim that the well had been sealed since 1843, that no one could have fallen in, that what the villagers saw were mere marks left by animals. But the villagers knew better. Elijah Hoffman, that same Lutheran elder who had cursed the papists, spoke of hearing a woman's cry, thin and shrill as it rose above the fog, only to be swallowed by the night. It was a sound that haunts a man, he told his grandson in old age, like a soul being torn from this world. And what of the sisters inside the convent? What of Sister Bernadette, Agnes's closest friend, who woke trembling in the cold and swore she heard the chapel bell toll once at the stroke of midnight, though no hand was there to pull its rope? Mother Catherine dismissed it as a dream, a trick of exhaustion, but her gaze, when she spoke, was harder than the winter ice. And her voice, calm, too calm, as if rehearsed, as if well practiced in silencing doubts. The disappearance was explained with precision, but beneath the surface terror grew. Each sister began to question the sound of every footstep, the meaning of every shadow. The great stone convent, meant to shelter, had become a tomb of secrets, and at night they would pray longer, not out of devotion, but out of fear. You see, what the nuns of St. Mary's learned, and what you must to understand now, is this. There are forces that cloak themselves in piety, that wear the robes of holiness, but whose true altar is power, and whose sacrament is control, and the price of questioning them, disappearance. Now look again at the well, imagine its black mouth yawning open beneath the moon, and ask yourself, how many voices were swallowed by its depths before the church declared the ground sacred and forbidden to all? It is easy to believe that evil announces itself with horns, with fire, with a roar that shakes the heavens. But at St. Mary's, evil moved quietly. It wore the soft steps of slippered feet on stone floors at midnight. It whispered in the corridors where the light of the sacred lamp cast long, unnatural shadows. It smiled with the thin-lipped approval of Mother Catherine, whose pale eyes seemed to grow colder as each sister vanished. After Agnes, it was Sister Bernadette, the one with the voice that could calm even the wildest orphan, the one whose lullabies had once been called a blessing by the local minister's wife. She too was gone, her absence explained as another transfer, this time to Chicago. But no stagecoach came, no letter announced her arrival. And though Mother Catherine praised Bernadette's devotion in morning prayers, the younger sisters noticed that the hymn chosen that day was not of celebration, but of mourning. And beneath the east window, in the garden where Bernadette had often tended the sickest orphans, the earth had been freshly turned. The sisters asked no questions, not aloud, because by then they understood the price of curiosity. They understood that to question was to invite a punishment that began with cold glances and ended in silence, eternal, unmarked, unexplained silence. But there were small rebellions, scraps of parchment tucked behind loose stones, secret glances exchanged between those who still dared hope, and there were the signs, the growing patches of dead earth in the garden where no seedling took root, the odd metallic taste of the well water that once had been sweet, the smell of burning wax that lingered long after the chapel candles had been snuffed out. You see, the rot at St. Mary's was not only of the flesh, it was of the spirit, and as more sisters disappeared, the rest began to feel it creeping through the walls, saying, eeping into their prayers, turning faith into fear. Tonight you listen safely, far from that cursed place, but ask yourself this: if such darkness could exist behind the walls of a house of God, how many other places of supposed sanctity hide horrors of their own? And if St. Mary's was a prison, who held the keys? Let us go deeper. The next name erased was Sister Mary Collins, and what happened to her shook even the most obedient to their core. Sister Mary Collins was the third to vanish, and with her disappearance the illusion of normalcy at St. Mary's finally shattered for those who remained. Mary was gentle, yes, but she possessed a mind sharpened by years of silent observation. She had noticed what others dared not see or chose to ignore. The way Mother Catherine's private meetings with Sister Margaret grew more frequent, more secretive. The strange deliveries that arrived at night, wagons heavy with crates that no one was permitted to open. The smell that clung to the air after these visits, a coppery tang, faint but unmistakable. The day before she disappeared, Mary confided in Sister Teresa. Her voice was hushed, her eyes hollow from nights of sleepless dread. "It is not God we serve here anymore," she said. "There is another master in this place, and I fear we are his offerings." That night, Sister Mary knelt in the chapel long after Compline, long after the others had gone to their cells. She prayed not aloud, but with silent tears. Her rosary clenched so tightly in her hands that the beads left marks in her skin. And then, as the moon passed behind a cloud and the convent was plunged into utter darkness, she was taken. The sound that roused Sister Teresa from her thin sleep was not a scream, but a single muffled cry, like the gasp of someone realizing too late that their fate was sealed. When the sisters assembled for matins, Mary's place was empty. Mother Catherine stood before them, her voice steady, her words rehearsed. Sister Mary, she announced, had been summoned to Rome. To Rome! The audacity of it struck even the most devout like a slap. No nun from a frontier convent was summoned to Rome without months of preparation, without ceremony. And yet the sisters swallowed the lie, because to protest would mean drawing that cold gaze upon themselves. But the unease spread like sickness. The orphans grew listless, the gardens withered, the chapel seemed colder, its candles burning shorter. The convent, once a house of God, had become a mausoleum of fear. And those who remained, they began to understand. They were not witnesses, they were next. Tell me, as you listen now, does your heart race? Good. That is the sound of awakening. We are not done. We go deeper still to the black heart of St. Mary's. Sister Mary Collins was the third to vanish, and with her disappearance the illusion of normalcy at St. Mary's finally shattered for those who remained. Mary was gentle, yes, but she possessed a mind sharpened by years of silent observation. She had noticed what others dared not see or chose to ignore. The way Mother Catherine's private meetings with Sister Margaret grew more frequent, more secretive. The strange deliveries that arrived at night, wagons heavy with crates that no one was permitted to open. The smell that clung to the air after these visits, a coppery tang, faint but unmistakable. The day before she disappeared, Mary confided in Sister Teresa. Her voice was hushed, her eyes hollow from nights of sleepless dread. "It is not God we serve here anymore," she said. "There is another master in this place, and I fear we are his offerings." That night, Sister Mary knelt in the chapel long after Compline, long after the others had gone to their cells. She prayed not aloud, but with silent tears. Her rosary clenched so tightly in her hands that the beads left marks in her skin. And then, as the moon passed behind a cloud and the convent was plunged into utter darkness, she was taken. The sound that roused Sister Teresa from her thin sleep was not a scream, but a single muffled cry, like the gasp of someone realizing too late that their fate was sealed. When the sisters assembled for matins, Mary's place was empty. Mother Catherine stood before them, her voice steady, her words rehearsed. Sister Mary, she announced, had been summoned to Rome. To Rome! The audacity of it struck even the most devout like a slap. No nun from a frontier convent was summoned to Rome without months of preparation, without ceremony. And yet the sisters swallowed the lie, because to protest would mean drawing that cold gaze upon themselves. But the unease spread like sickness. The orphans grew listless, the gardens withered, the chapel seemed colder, its candles burning shorter. The convent, once a house of God, had become a mausoleum of fear. And those who remained, they began to understand. They were not witnesses, they were next. Tell me, as you listen now, does your heart race? Good. That is the sound of awakening. We are not done. We go deeper still to the black heart of St. Mary's. And now you begin to see. The darkness that consumed St. Mary's was not an accident. It was not born of misfortune or mismanagement. It was invited into those hallowed walls by hands that should have served God, but instead served something far older, far hungrier. After Teresa's silent return, a new fear settled over the convent like a pall. No one spoke of what she had seen. They did not dare. But their eyes, their hollow, sleepless eyes, told the story. The nuns moved like shadows, gaunt and haunted. The orphans cried out in their sleep, plagued by nightmares of cloaked figures and unseen terrors. And the villagers? They kept their distance, unnerved by the growing sickness that seemed to emanate from the stone walls. Livestock born deformed, wells fouled with slime, a blight that blackened the convent's gardens no matter how Sister Margaret toiled. But still, donations continued. Letters of praise flowed from the diocese. The church's machine turned as always, blind to the suffering within its gears, or perhaps willfully deaf to it. And at the center of it all stood Mother Catherine. Her once proud bearing had become rigid, statuesque, as if she herself were turning to stone. Her sermons grew darker, her penances crueler. She spoke often of sacrifice, of the necessity of suffering for redemption. And the sisters, they obeyed. Because in such places, obedience is survival. But one night, the night the tide truly turned, came a visitor. A priest, unfamiliar, his robes immaculate, his face obscured beneath a broad-brimmed hat. He arrived at dusk and was welcomed without question. No name was given, no blessing exchanged. He entered the east wing and did not emerge. But from that night forward, the disappearances accelerated. Sister Teresa kept count in her heart. 6 gone, then 9, then 12. Each name erased, each memory buried beneath layers of whispered lies. And in the records, transfers, reassignments, God's work. But you and I, we know better. We see the pattern, we feel the weight of the truth. St. Mary's was no convent, it was a mask worn by a predator that fed on innocence and was shielded by the very institution sworn to protect it. And now you are beginning to understand. The question is, will you dare to look deeper? Because what comes next, few can bear. Few can bear what I'm about to tell you. But you've come this far, and now there's no turning back. The veil is lifting, and what waits beneath it is not the piety you've been taught to admire, but the machinery of control dressed in robes of virtue. By the autumn of 1857, St. Mary's was a hollow shell of what it once pretended to be. 12 nuns gone. 12 names stricken from the records, their fates sealed behind lies and sealed doors. And those who remained, they were no longer sisters. They were prisoners, bound not by chains of iron, but by chains of fear and obedience. Sister Teresa kept watch, her body wasting away from sleepless nights and sparse, tasteless meals. She counted the wagons that came in the dark, bringing with them crates that seemed heavier with each visit. She marked the faces of the silent men who unloaded them, men who bore no crosses, no signs of faith, their eyes empty, their mouths tight with secrets. And still, the church above sang its praises. Still, donations flowed. The faithful, unaware, believed they were supporting orphans, the sick, the poor. But the poor souls in St. Mary's received nothing but cruelty. In the East Wing, Mother Catherine's private domain, the rituals grew darker. The sisters were forbidden to enter, but the sounds could not be stopped. The low hum of chanting, the scraping of stone against stone, the sharp metallic clang of something being forged or broken, no one could tell which, and the cries, the muffled sobs, the whispered pleas, the final choked gasps that echoed down the halls long after the candles had burned low. Sister Margaret, once a healer, now a silent accomplice. She kept to her garden behind the fence, brewing tinctures that none dared question. Remedies, she said, but no one asked what they cured or what they hid. And still the sisters obeyed, because obedience is survival, and Bicay, use hope that most fragile of lights, had long since guttered out in the chill of St. Mary's stone walls. And as you listen now, I ask you, do you feel it? That cold hand creeping up your spine? That is the truth, reaching for you. And once it takes hold, you will never see the world the same way again. Let's descend further. The worst is yet to come. The worst is yet to come. And if your heart beats faster now, if your breath grows shallow, that is the body's instinct. It senses the truth before the mind dares to grasp it. By the winter of 1858, St. Mary's was no longer a convent. It was a theatre of shadows, where the sacred had been hollowed out and filled with something unspeakable. The East Wing's windows, once lit by candlelight and prayer, now glowed with a strange flickering hue at night, like fire, but not fire. And the smoke that drifted from the chimneys carried a stench that made even the wolves avoid the grounds. Inside, the sisters moved like ghosts. The bells still rang, matins, lauds, vespers. But no one heard them as calls to prayer anymore. They were funeral tolls, each one marking the slow death of faith within those stone walls. Sister Teresa watched as the orphans dwindled in number. Adopted, they said, but no records existed, no visitors came, and the children who remained grew pale, hollow-eyed, their laughter silenced, their bodies thin and fragile. Then came the night that confirmed what Teresa had feared all along. A storm raged over the lake, the wind howling through the trees like the voices of the damned. The sisters huddled in their cells, praying the rosary with trembling hands as the East Wing's doors opened wide to the night. By the flash of lightning, Teresa saw them. Cloaked figures, faces hidden, carrying heavy sacks slung over their shoulders. They moved in and out of the East Wing with terrible purpose, their footsteps lost beneath the storm's fury. And in the morning, beneath the shattered branches and the mud, the ground near the garden was churned, as if something had been buried or exhumed. The church sent no investigators. The bishop wrote no letters, and the world beyond St. Mary's walls remained blind, because blindness is easy when truth threatens to shatter. What we want to believe. You listen now, drawn deeper with every word. Good, because the world you knew is already gone. Comment below, twice, with the words, "The veil is broken." Mark your descent. Let it be known you see, and once you see, there is no turning back. We descend further still. The veil is broken. You have spoken it, and now you are marked. Marked as one who dares look where others avert their eyes, one who chooses to know rather than to believe. And so, we descend deeper. By the spring of 1859, the final mask at St. Mary's had crumbled. The orphans were gone. Every last one, vanished like the sisters before them, with no paperwork, no visitors, no adoptions, no farewells. Their small beds remained stripped of linen. Their meager toys lay untouched, dust gathering upon them like ash on a grave. And still the bells rang. Still the church spoke of charity and salvation. Still, Mother Catherine stood before her dwindling flock, her voice steady, her eyes hollow, her words laced with poison disguised as scripture. She spoke of the necessary culling of the weak, of the purification of the soul through silence and suffering, and those who remained, those few sisters whose minds had not yet shattered, obeyed. Because what else was left to them? Beyond those walls, the world had forgotten them. Within, the East Wing had become a chapel of another faith entirely, a faith older than Rome, older than Jerusalem, older than Babylon, a faith that demanded blood, and Mother Catherine had become its high priestess. Teresa saw it in glimpses, a black altar raised where once they prayed, symbols carved into the stone, symbols no priest had ever taught her, bowls of dark liquid steaming in the cold air, and the men, those same cloaked figures, returning, always at night, always through the east wing, their faces never revealed. Sister Margaret brewed her potions still, but no longer for healing. And the garden behind the fence? No longer herbs, no longer food, just the earth, black and dead, fed by things no garden should ever know. And outside, the villagers stayed away. The woods around St. Mary's grew wild, the path choked by thorns, as if nature itself sought to seal the place away. But you see it now, don't you? The true horror of St. Mary's was never the vanishings, it was the purpose behind them. Sacrifice to an ancient hunger cloaked in the garments of the church. And that hunger was not yet sated, not by 12, not by 20, not by 23, not by 23. And if you listen closely now, if you let the silence of this story fill your room, your mind, you might almost hear them. The lost voices, the stolen prayers, the soft, hopeless weeping of those who were led to the East Wing and never seen again. 23 nuns, 12 orphans, and perhaps others. Forgotten souls whose names were never recorded, whose faces were never mourned. You see, by the summer of 1860, St. Mary's had become a place no sane person entered willingly. The forest had grown thick, choking the path with gnarled branches. The villagers crossed themselves when passing the old road, muttering prayers not found in any book, and within the convent the walls themselves seemed to press inward as if eager to smother the last breath of innocence. Mother Catherine's sermons became rarer, her voice now a dry whisper, but when she spoke only of obedience and submission, and the sisters obeyed because defiance meant joining the vanished. They obeyed, even when told to fast for days while feasts were prepared behind the doors of the East Wing, feasts none of them would ever taste. They obeyed, even when commanded to scrub bloodstains from the stones, told it was spilled wine from the sacraments. They obeyed, even when the bells rang at midnight, summoning not to prayer but to witness acts they could not speak of, not even in confession. And Sister Teresa? She kept her silence, but her spirit had broken. Her hair turned white before its time. Her hands trembled as she worked the garden's dead soil. She had become a ghost of herself, waiting, as they all waited, for the East Wing's summons. And through it all, the church's records spoke of glory, of God's work prospering in the wilderness, of a convent that stood as a beacon of mercy on the frontier. The lies layered so thick that even truth itself struggled to, breathe beneath them. But you hear it now, don't you? You hear the truth beneath the hymn, beneath the sermon, beneath the carefully worded report. The truth that power, once corrupted, devours everything it touches, and that St. Mary's was never about salvation. It was about feeding the beast that wore the mask of God. And its appetite had only begun. The appetite had only begun. And by 1861, St. Mary's had become more than a convent. It had become a monument to hunger. Hunger for power. Hunger for control. Hunger for the kind of dominance that does not end at the walls of a single building, but spreads, like rot beneath the surface of a tree that seems strong until the storm comes. And storm it did. The world beyond St. Mary's was changing. War had come to the nation. Men fought and died in fields far from Wisconsin, and the church, as always, positioned itself as a voice of comfort, a shepherd for lost souls. But within those stone walls, no comfort remained, only ritual, only sacrifice, only the endless, gnawing need of the thing that St. Mary's now served. Sister Margaret, the healer, no longer spoke at all. Her eyes, once quick and clever, stared blankly, as if seeing a world no one else could. The brew she once prepared for coughs and fevers now served another purpose entirely. Potions to dull the will, to break the body, to ready the offering. And Mother Catherine, she had become a figure beyond fear. She walked the halls at night, silent, barefoot, a shadow among shadows. The sisters heard her murmuring to herself in a tongue none of them knew, a language of stone and blood, of ancient promises made in the dark before memory began. And always the East Wing waited, the door that no one dared open, the door that, when night fell, seemed to breathe. And the bells rang. The bells rang at strange hours, their tones warped, discordant, a sound that made the skin crawl, that set the teeth on edge, that turned prayer into despair. And through it all, the records remained pristine. The reports to the bishop spoke of virtue, of charity, of a community thriving under God's grace. But you know the truth now, don't you? You see beneath the words. St. Mary's was not a convent, it was a gateway, and every soul offer up behind its walls was a toll paid to keep that gate open just a little wider. And the question you must ask yourself now is this: how many other gates stand hidden in plain sight? How many wear the mask of sanctity while feeding the dark? How many gates stand hidden in plain sight? That is the question that should haunt you now, because St. Mary's was only one of many, a single stone in a vast and terrible architecture built across centuries, across continents, an architecture of power, hidden behind symbols of mercy. And St. Mary's was a perfect piece of that design. By the autumn of 1861, the last of the orphans had vanished. The nuns who remained knew better than to ask where they had gone. They knew better than to ask about the strange figures seen slipping into the east wing by moonlight. They knew better than to ask about the heavy wagons that arrived at night and departed before dawn, because the price of asking was too high. The price of asking was to become the next to disappear. Sister Teresa, whose spirit had once burned bright, now moved like a spectre, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow. She kept to the garden, though nothing grew there anymore, nothing but weeds and thorns. The earth had soured, the air had soured, and the east wing pulsed like a wound that would not close. It was said the stone of the walls sweated on warm nights, as if the building itself tried to purge what lived within, but what lived within had grown too strong, too hungry. And Mother Catherine, she no longer pretended, no sermons, no blessings, only commands delivered in that low, terrible voice that brooked no argument, only the endless rituals behind closed doors, only the bells tolling at the wrong hours, tolling not for prayer but for submission. And yet the records spoke of glory. The records spoke of a community thriving in charity. The records spoke of good works and holy deeds, and in those records there was no mention of 23 vanished nuns, no mention of 12 lost children, no mention of the horror that St. Mary's had become. Because that is how he machine works, my friend. The machine that grinds innocence beneath its wheels while showing the world the face of righteousness. And now you see it. You see it. And you can never look away again. Let's go deeper. There is more. Always more. Always more. That is the nature of the beast. It feeds, it grows, and it always demands more. And St. Mary's was not just a place of sacrifice, it was a proving ground, a test of how far obedience could be stretched before it snapped. But obedience did not snap at St. Mary's. It bent, it twisted, it became a noose around the necks of the sisters, and they tightened it themselves day after day, prayer after prayer. By 1862, there were only a handful of nuns left within those cursed walls. The faces of the missing haunted every corridor, every cell, every chapel pew, but their names were spoken no longer. To speak their names was to invite the east wing's gaze, and so silence reigned. Mother Catherine no longer walked among them by day. She was seen only at night, a figure of black upon black, gliding through the halls like death itself. And the rituals? They no longer waited for the cover of darkness. The east wing's windows glowed at all hours, as if an unholy fire burned within. The chanting, once soft and hidden, now echoed through the stone like a dirge for the damned. And still, the church praised St. Mary's. Still, it sent letters of commendation. Still, it pointed to the convent as a beacon of faith in the wilderness. Because that is the genius of the machine. It turns horror into virtue. It hides corruption beneath the robes of piety. And it counts on the faithful to see only what they are told to see. But Sister Teresa saw. She saw, and she endured, waiting for the chance to act, to expose, to destroy. But that chance never came. Because at St. Mary's the game was rigged from the start. The hunger that lived in the east wing was older, stronger, more patient than any human defiance. And as you sit here, listening, drawn deeper into this truth, ask yourself, how many places like St. Mary's exist? How many walls hide a darkness that feeds on the moan? Innocent, protected by the lies of the powerful, St. Mary's was a symptom. The disease is everywhere, and we are only beginning to see it. We are only beginning to see it. And once you see, you can never unsee. St. Mary's is gone now. The walls crumbled, the gardens overtaken by wild thorns, the east wing collapsed upon itself as if the earth had grown weary of holding its secrets. But the hunger that thrived there, the hunger moved on. Because evil does not die, it only finds new masks, new names, new sanctuaries behind which to hide. After the convent's final collapse in 1862, the official story was simple. A fire, a tragic fire, they said, caused by lightning or perhaps faulty lamps, a disaster that claimed the lives of the brave sisters who served so faithfully. The bishop wept at the memorial service. The faithful donated generously for the rebuilding. The land was blessed and sold, and the records were sealed. But sealed records do not erase what happened. They do not silence the voices of the lost. And those who lived nearby, those who survived, they knew better. They told stories in hushed tones. Stories of screams carried on the wind, of a red glow that lit the night sky, not like any fire they had ever seen, of figures that fled into the woods as the walls fell, vanishing before dawn. The church rebuilt nothing there. The land was left to rot, as if the very soil had been poisoned. And in time, people forgot, or pretended to, because that is safer, that is easier. But you are not one of them, are you? You have followed this descent willingly. You have stared into the pit that was St. Mary's and understood what it truly was, a node in a network of corruption that spans centuries, a node that was sacrificed only because it had served its purpose. And the machine that feeds on the innocent, it moves on, it adapts, it thrives. The question is not what happened at St. Mary's. The question is, where is the next St. Mary's being built, and how many already stand unnoticed in the shadows of your world? Keep listening. The deeper truths are still to come, and they will change you forever. And now, the change begins. You've crossed the threshold. You've left behind the safety of ignorance, and what waits ahead will reshape the way you see everything. Because St. Mary's wasn't an isolated horror. It was a blueprint, a demonstration of how darkness can wear the robes of the holy, how evil can thrive not in defiance of institutions, but within them, protected by them, fed by them. You see, after the fire, or what they called a fire, the bishops wrote of tragedy, but the letters they sent to Rome told another tale, a tale of success, of an experiment completed, of obedience perfected, of what could be accomplished when fear was the currency and faith was the leash. The East Wing, they said, had served its purpose. And the hunger? The hunger had been satisfied for a time, but hunger like that always returns, always. And so, the pattern began again. New convents, new missions, new beacons of charity in distant lands, each one a mask, each one a gate. The faithful came, bringing offerings, bringing trust, and behind closed doors, the machine continued its work. You want to believe this is history. You want to believe that St. Mary's is gone, that its horrors are buried beneath the ash and ruin. But look around you. Look at the structures that command your respect, your loyalty, your silence. Look at how easily a robe, a title, a cross can become a shield for corruption. St. Mary's was not the end, it was a beginning, and what they learned there, how to control, how to erase, how to feed the hunger without ever being seen, that knowledge lives on. You feel it, don't you? That cold realization settling into your bones, that voice whispering that nothing is as it seems, and that voice is right. We go deeper still, because you haven't seen the darkest corners yet, and once you do, once you truly see, you will never again walk through this world as you did before. Prepare yourself, the veil is gone, now comes the abyss, now comes the abyss. And if you've stayed with me this far, it means something inside you has awakened. That part of you that refuses to be a pawn, that part that hungers not for comfort, but for truth, no matter how black, no matter how bitter. St. Mary's taught them much. But what they learned wasn't about faith, it was about mastery, psychological mastery. They learned that to control the body, you first break the spirit. And that is what St. Mary's became, a crucible where the spirit was shattered, reforged and shattered again. The East Wing wasn't just a place of sacrifice, it was a laboratory of obedience. And Mother Catherine, she was no mere fanatic, she was their instrument. Her orders came from far beyond the convent walls, from men whose names you'll never see in history books, men who understood that the truest power is hidden power, men who knew that an empire built on faith is more unshakable than any built on steel. And so St. Mary's became their proving ground. The disappearances, the rituals, the endless penance that drained the will from the sisters, all of it was a test to see how far they could bend the human soul before it broke. And when it broke, they learned how to shape what was left into something useful, something obedient. And when St. Mary's finally collapsed, when the lies grew too thin, When the hunger drew too much attention, they simply moved the experiment elsewhere. Because the hunger didn't die in those ruins. The hunger is a system that wraps itself in symbols, in hymns, in sacred texts, a system that feeds on the faithful while promising salvation. And now you see that system. You see its outline in every institution that demands your trust but hides its books, every voice that preaches virtue but demands your silence. St. Mary's was one chapter. There are more, far more, and as we go deeper, you will see how they connect. You will see what they built, and you will understand why they fear men who see as you now do. The abyss is open. We step forward. We step forward. And with each step you feel it, the weight of what they've hidden, the enormity of the deception, the cold grip of a truth that reshapes everything you thought you knew. St. Mary's fell, but its lessons were preserved, its methods refined. What began in that isolated convent by Lake Michigan became a model exported across oceans, across borders, into every place where control was the true currency of power. The East Wing was not demolished in spirit. It was replicated again and again, in missions, in schools, in asylums, in so-called houses of mercy. Different walls, same hunger. The hunger for submission, the hunger for souls willing to kneel, not in faith, but in surrender. And the architects? They learned to perfect their mask. No more crude brutality that might draw attention. No more fires that left smoldering ruins and questions. No, they learned subtlety. They learned how to hide the East Wing in plain sight, a kindly priest who smiles as he tightens the leash, a teacher who praises discipline while breaking a child's will, a leader who speaks of service but demands unquestioning loyalty. The blueprint of St. Mary's became the foundation of countless institutions where power fed upon innocence beneath the banner of virtue. And the machine that began there, it grew vast, it grew sophisticated, it learned to feed in ways that left no bloodstains on the floor. You see it now, don't you? In the empty eyes of those who trust too easily, in the hollow promises of those who claim to serve but truly rule, in the quiet compliance of those taught from birth to never question the hand that claims to bless them. St. Mary's was the prototype. The world we live in now is the product. And if you feel unease, good. That unease is the spark of awakening. The East Wing was just a room, but the hunger it fed, that hunger was always for your soul. And now that, you see it, the only question that matters is this: will you feed it, or will you fight it? We go deeper. The heart of the machine waits. The heart of the machine waits. And it beats beneath everything you were taught to trust. Listen closely. Can you hear it now? That slow, steady thrum beneath the sermons, beneath the pledges, beneath the sacred oaths, whispered in darkened halls. That is the true engine of the East Wing, an engine built not of stone or wood, but of obedience, fear, and silence. St. Mary's was only one of many places where that engine was tested, tuned, perfected, and when it fell, the architects did not grieve. No, they documented, they adapted, they expanded. You must understand, St. Mary's was never about faith. It was about systems of control masquerading as salvation. It was about teaching the masses to kneel at the feet of those who hungered not for God, but for domination. They learned that shame is a more effective shackle than iron, that guilt can chain a soul more tightly than any prison bar, that the promise of forgiveness is the perfect tool to keep a man begging at your door. And so they built more East Wings. Not always in convents, sometimes in schools where children were taught to hate their own questions, sometimes in hospitals where the vulnerable were kept dependent, sometimes in courts where justice wore the robes of corruption. The East Wing is wherever power feeds unseen, and the hunger, it evolved, no longer content with bodies. It wanted minds, it wanted wills, it wanted generations of souls trained from birth to surrender before they even knew they had the right to resist. And all of it was done behind the mask of virtue, the mask of charity, the mask of God. But now you see beneath the mask. Now you know why St. Mary's matters. It was not a tragedy. It was not an isolated darkness. It was the seed of something that surrounds you even now. And as you hear these words, as the truth takes root inside you, you must decide, will you be one of the faithful ones? Or will you become one of the few who see, who fight, who break the cycle? Because the machine counts on your blindness. And now you are no longer blind. We go deeper. The architects are waiting. The architects are waiting. And they have always been waiting, because that is what true power does. It waits, it watches, it tests. The architects of St. Mary's were not the clergy you saw in public, not the bishops who blessed the masses, not the priests who whispered comfort in confessions. No, the architects were the ones who shaped the structure of control, who wrote the rules behind closed doors, who designed a system so perfect in its cruelty that it could devour generations while calling itself holy. And what they learned at St. Mary's, they applied like craftsmen, refining a masterpiece. They understood that the greatest prison is invisible, that the most obedient slave is the one who believes he is free, and so they built east wings that needed no walls. East wings of the mind, east wings of the spirit. They taught entire populations to kneel without chains, to censor their own thoughts, to worship their own submission. You feel it, don't you? That cold breath on the back of your neck, the knowledge that what happened at St. Mary's wasn't a story of the past, it is a map of the present. A blueprint etched into the foundations of every institution that demands your faith while offering no proof. A mask worn by every figure who speaks of service but demands your silence. And now you understand why they fear men like you. Men who listen, men who see, men who question. Because the East Wing still exists. It exists wherever people are taught to trade their strength for absolution, their freedom for belonging, their voice for approval. And you have crossed the line. You've seen the machine beneath the altar. The architects know you now, and they will do what they've always done, offer comfort, distraction, false hope. Because they believe you can still be pacified, but can you? If you see this, if you truly see this, comment below. No more masks, no more chains. Comment it twice, lock it in, mark yourself, and let the architects know you are awake. We go deeper still. The heart of the East Wing is yet to be revealed. The heart of the East Wing is yet to be revealed, and what waits there is not a person, not a demon, not some ancient beast lurking in the shadows. No, what waits at the heart is the idea that power must consume, that to rule is to feed, that the machine is righteous because it preserves itself no matter the cost. That is the true face of the East Wing, not stone and mortar, but belief. Belief weaponized, belief forged into a tool sharper than any blade. And the architects? They were masters of this craft. They understood that fear binds, but belief binds deeper. Fear fades, belief endures. So they wove their hunger into the prayers, into the hymns, into the very rhythm of daily life. They taught generations to see submission as virtue, to see obedience as strength. They wrapped their chains in scripture, their lies in ritual. And it worked. God, how it worked. St. Mary's was the experiment, but the world we live in now, that is the result. A world where men kneel to systems that despise them. A world where loyalty is demanded by those who see you only as fuel. A world where the East Wing's hunger is fed in 1,000 quiet ways every single day. You know it. You feel it in your bones. That's why you're still here listening. Because something inside you has begun to rebel. That part of you that was never meant to kneel. That part that sees the mask and hungers to tear it away. And know this. The architects fear that part of you. They built the machine to keep it asleep, to smother it in comfort and distraction. But it stirs now. It stirs because you've seen too much. And what comes next? What comes next is the choice. The East Wing lives wherever men refuse to see, wherever men choose the safety of the lie over the terror of the truth. But not you. You've stepped beyond the lie, and from here, the path only darkens. The question is, will you keep walking? Because once you see the heart, there is no turning back. Let's go deeper. Let's tear the mask off completely. Let's tear the mask off completely, because only then will you see the East Wing for what it truly is. You see, the architects never cared for souls. Souls were currency. Souls were fuel. What they worshipped was the machine itself, the system, the great hidden structure that consumes the many to feed the few. And St. Mary's was their forge. In those stone halls they refined the tools of control until they were invisible. They learned how to shape guilt into chains, how to weaponize faith against the faithful, how to make men grateful for the yoke placed upon their necks. And what they built there did not stay within those walls. It spread. It infected other institutions, schools, courts, governments. It infected entire cultures. They learned that if you break a child early, they will grow into a man who cannot see his chains. They learned that if you teach submission as virtue, rebellion becomes sin. They learned that if you hide your hunger behind good works, no one will question what you consume. and the East Wing became a symbol, a code, a design copied and pasted into the blueprints of power everywhere. That's why you felt it, even if you didn't have the words for it. That tightness in your chest when you're told to trust, without question. That cold in your gut when you see injustice paraded as law. That whisper in your mind that says, something is wrong, this isn't what it claims to be. That whisper is truth. That whisper is the East Wing calling out, and not as a place, but as a pattern. And now you stand at the threshold of that pattern's heart. And what waits there is more than history. What waits there is the truth of the world you live in. The question is, will you face it? Will you have the strength to see it for what it is, or will you look away, as so many have before? The architects count on you looking away, but not this time. Not now. We go deeper. The final veil begins to tear. The final veil begins to tear, and what lies beyond it is not what they wanted you to see, not what the architects hoped you'd ever find. Beneath the East Wing, beneath St. Mary's, beneath every cathedral, school and palace built by their design, there is only one truth. The system exists to feed itself. The machine is the god they served. The hunger is the altar upon which generations were sacrificed, and they dressed it up in beauty. They cloaked it in sacred words. They built soaring spires to make you look up, so you'd never see what writhed beneath. But now you see, the East Wing is wherever men are taught that surrender is holiness. The East Wing is wherever the strong are shamed for their strength, wherever questions are met with punishment, wherever loyalty is twisted into a leash. You feel it, don't you? That sick recognition, that quiet fury rising in your chest, because you've knelt before the East Wing yourself, in ways you didn't even realize. You were born into its design, you were raised within its walls, and all the while they whispered, obey, give, trust. And in return, they fed on you, fed on your time, your will, your strength, fed on your belief that they served some higher good. But here's the truth they never wanted you to hear. The only thing they served was the hunger, the machine. And now that you see it, what will you do? Because the mask is gone. The East Wing stands naked before you, not as a place, but as the pattern of control that shaped your world. And you are no longer their pawn. That feeling in your gut right now, that is power awakening. That is what they fear. And so I ask you again, will you feed the machine? Or will you tear it down? Because once you see the East Wing, you cannot unsee it, and you cannot pretend it was never there. The architects are watching, but so are the few who fight. We go deeper still. The core awaits. The core awaits. And now, with every word, with every truth uncovered, you feel its gravity pulling you in. The core of the East Wing, the core of the machine. It is not a place. It is not a face. It is a law. The law the architects built everything upon. Power feeds, power consumes, power endures because it takes. And every structure they raised, every convent, every courtroom, every palace, every pulpit, was a mouth to devour. St. Mary's was never about salvation. It was about refining that law, testing how much could be taken before the flock even noticed the blood on the altar. And what they learned there, what the architects mastered, they unleashed upon the world. You see it now, don't you? The East Wing pattern hidden in plain sight. The charity that masks exploitation. The promise of justice that hides the machinery of oppression. The sacred oath that binds the servant while the master stands unbound. This is what they learned at St. Mary's. That a man will guard the chains that bind him if you convince him they were forged for his own good. And they didn't just convince the nuns of St. Mary's. They convinced the world. But now that you've seen beneath the veil, you feel the sickness of it, the weight of centuries of theft disguised as piety, the taste of ash where once there was faith, and this is where most turn back. This is where most say, enough, but not you. You're still here because some part of you always knew. Some part of you was waiting for this moment, the moment when the mask fell, the moment when the East Wing's true face stared back at you. And what you do now, what you choose now, that is what the machine fears most, because it does not fear your anger, it does not fear your outrage, it fears your clarity, your refusal, your strength. We go deeper. The architects left a flaw in their design, and now we expose it. The flaw, the crack in the machine's perfect design, the one thing the architects could never control no matter how tightly they wove their net. Awareness. Awareness is the enemy of the East Wing. Awareness is the poison in the machine's veins, because the moment you see, truly see, what was done to you, what was done to generations before you, what was built around you, the spell is broken. The chains lose their weight. The hunger can no longer feed. And that is why the architects worked so hard for so long to keep you blind. That is why the East Wing wasn't just a place of brick and mortar. It was a design for your mind, a cathedral of illusions built inside your head. Every ritual, every rule, every silent command whispered from pulpits and thrones, all of it meant to keep you asleep, to keep you kneeling. But look where you stand now. The East Wing's design is laid bare. The system that began in those cold stone halls has spread into your schools, your laws, your churches, your governments. The same hunger, the same machine. But here's what they could never control. A man who sees, a man who knows, a man who chooses. And that's what you are becoming. Every word you've heard tonight has torn another brick from the East Wing's walls inside you. And now you stand before the core, the heart of the machine, and you see it for what it is. Empty. Hungry, hollow. It was never holy, it was never righteous. It was only ever a mask for those who feed, and the question burns before you now. Will you feed it, or will you fight it? The architects counted on your blindness, they counted on your silence, but you are awake. And what comes next will define who you become. The final layers fall away. The truth that remains will change everything. Are you ready? We go deeper. The final revelations wait. The final revelations wait, and they will not comfort you. Because here, at the bottom of the abyss, there are no more excuses, no more illusions to cling to, only the raw, unvarnished truth. You were never meant to be free. The architects of the East Wing, the architects of St. Mary's, the architects of the systems you've lived under your entire life, they built their world on one principle, that men are easier to rule when they believe their chains are virtues. And so they taught obedience as holiness, they taught silence as wisdom, they taught suffering as sacred, and they built institutions that fed on the faithful, that thrived on the guilt of the good, that turned devotion into fuel for their endless machine. But now that you see it, you realize something they prayed you would never realize. The machine has no power you do not give it. The East Wing was never about brick or stone, it was about you, about what you would believe, about what you would accept, about what you would surrender. And every time a man believed the lie, that submission was strength, that sacrifice without question was noble, the machine grew stronger. But the flaw in their design, the flaw is you, the you that sees, the you that questions, the you that says, no more. And that's why they fear you now. That's why the architects work so hard to keep you distracted, pacified, divided. Because the man who sees the East Wing for what it is the man who can tear it down, not with violence but with refusal, with clarity, with the strength to stand where others kneel. And so here you are, at the core, at the end of the rabbit hole, and the choice is yours. Feed the machine, or break it. The final truth waits. The last layer peels back, and when you see it, when you truly see it, nothing will ever be the same again. Let's go deeper. The architect's secret is about to be revealed. The architect's secret is about to be revealed, and it is darker than you imagined. All along you've been searching for faces, names, some hidden council pulling the strings from shadowed halls. But the truth is far colder. The architects were not a handful of men. The architects were not a secret order. The architects were an idea so simple, so effective, that it passed from one generation of rulers to the next like a torch in the dark. The idea that control is survival, that to rule is to consume, that the many exist to serve the few, and the few are justified in all they do, so long as they preserve the machine. This is the legacy of the East Wing. This is what St. Mary's was built to perfect. A model for turning faith into fuel, loyalty into leverage, and innocence into currency. And once the design was perfected, it no longer needed cathedrals, it no longer needed convents. The East Wing became the world. The East Wing became the systems you see all around you. Systems that demand your trust but hide their purpose, that claim to serve you but quietly take everything that matters. And the most brilliant part of their design, they taught you to protect it, to believe it was for your own good, to fear the very freedom that could break it. But here you are, and the chains no longer fit. The hunger no longer hides. The architect's greatest secret, the one they buried deepest, is this. The machine is powerless against the man who sees it, the man who refuses to kneel, the man who chooses clarity over comfort. That man is dangerous. That man terrifies them. That man is what you are becoming. And as we approach the final revelation, ask yourself, why do they fear your sight more than your sword? Because a man who sees, truly sees, cannot be ruled. The last veil is falling. The final truth is within reach. The question is, will you claim it? Let's go deeper. The end waits. The end waits. And with it, the truth they never wanted you to see. You were taught to fear the wolf at the door, the stranger in the night, the beast in the dark. But the real predator was always inside the walls. It smiled from the pulpit. It blessed from the throne. It offered you safety, but only at the cost of your soul. And now at the bottom of the abyss, you see it clearly. The East Wing, St. Mary's, the machine. It was never an isolated evil. It was the template for the world you live in now, a world where power wears the mask of virtue, a world where hunger calls itself justice, a world where the architects don't need to hide because they taught you to defend them. That is the final secret. The East Wing didn't fail. It succeeded beyond its creators' wildest hopes. It showed them how easy it is to build a prison of belief, how simple it is to turn devotion into a leash, how profitable it is to sell salvation while harvesting obedience. The machine fed on the nuns of St. Mary's, and when it was done, it fed on towns, cities, nations. It fed on generations, and it still feeds. Every time a man gives his loyalty to those who despise him, every time a man bows before a system that consumes him. But here, now, at the edge of this final truth, the choice is no longer hidden from you. You see the machine, you see its hunger, and you know its weakness. The man who sees it, the man who speaks, the man who refuses, that is the one thing the machine cannot consume. That is why they built the East Wing, to blind you to that truth. But you're not blind anymore, and so I ask you one last time to mark yourself. Comment below. No more masks, no more chains. Comment it twice. Let the machine know you see it. Let the architects know you will not kneel. The final step waits. The last piece of the East Wing's secret is ready to be revealed. Are you ready? Let's go deeper. The conclusion is here. The conclusion is here, and with it, the final truth. The East Wing was never just St. Mary's. It was never just a convent, or a chapter of dark history buried in dusty archives. The East Wing was a prototype, a blueprint, a proving ground for the perfect lie. And that lie, that masterpiece of control, became the foundation for the world that surrounds you now. A world where men are trained from birth to kneel, to obey, to believe that their worth is measured by how much they can give to a system that only takes. A world where the machine feeds endlessly because it taught its prey to volunteer for the slaughter. But now you know, now you see it, and there is no turning back. The architects hoped you'd never reach this place. They hoped you'd be satisfied with shadows, with myths, with half-truths. But you kept going, you kept listening, you kept tearing away the masks. And now, at the heart of the machine, you see what they feared most. You. Because a man who sees the East Wing for what it is a man who cannot be ruled, a man who cannot be used, a man who cannot be consumed. And that man is dangerous. That man is the beginning of the machine's end. So the final truth is not about the architects. It's not about the system. It's about you. The East Wing survives only as long as men choose blindness, as long as men choose comfort over clarity, as long as men choose chains over freedom. But you've chosen to see, you've chosen to know, and now you choose what comes next. Will you feed the machine, or will you become the floor that brings it down? The East Wing taught them how to rule. Now you must teach them how a man breaks free. The rabbit hole ends here. The choice is yours. No more masks, no more chains.